at Sports, we all know volunteers are at the heart of what we do. And this empowerment session seeks to talk more about volunteerism as our ways of working. Always ensure your microphones are always on mute. Yes, unless you've been given a platform to speak. It's advised you keep a journal to take note of vital points and submissions. Keep an open mind. Always ask questions. Feel free to ask questions once the time is due. Great. So before we begin the session, I'm sure most of us are familiar with the Japanese concept Tai Doshin. I mostly use this concept very well, which means many in body, one in mind. So when we come to analyze this, principally it boils down to volunteerism, which is encapsulated in unity. So celebrating National Volunteers Day recently, we are fortunate to have Farida here to shed light on the topic, volunteers as advocates for literacy and development more generally. At this point, I wouldn't want to waste much time, and then I'll move on to introducing our guest. So Farida is the head of partnership and communications at EduSport and a social entrepreneur advocating for literacy in Nigeria. She's the founder and literacy lead at the Bookworm Cafe. Farida earned her bachelor's degree in electrical and electronics engineering from the University of Benin in Nigeria. She has over 10 years experience working in different corporate sectors, from consulting to telecommunication to energy. She also has additional 6 years experience running the Bookworm Cafe. Farida is passionate about children's literacy, STEM, and inclusive education. Ladies and gentlemen, with all the love and respect you have, help me welcome Farida Ladipo-Ajayi. Farida, you're welcome. And over to you if you're ready.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the opportunity. So let me try to share my screen because I'm going to be doing a presentation. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Super visible.
Okay, so as Fad said, I work with EduSport, but I also started a literacy company in Nigeria as well, and it's called the Bookworm Cafe. So I'm going to be talking about volunteers as advocates for literacy. So first of all, before I start, happy Volunteers Day. Volunteers Day in Ghana was yesterday, so happy Volunteers Day to all our volunteers. So everybody really.
Thank you.
Happy Volunteers Day. Okay, so I'm going to go through the slides and I will speak to it as I move on. So these are the things we'll go through as we'll talk about. I'll do an introduction. Fad has done pretty much the main introduction, and we'll talk about literacy. What is literacy? And let's even establish what literacy is. Then we'll talk about why we need to advocate for it. What's all the fuss about literacy that we need to advocate for it? We'll talk about early literacy, because sometimes when we think of literacy, we're thinking, oh, children who can read, who are old enough to read and write. Well, it starts from the foundation, from when they're really young. And then we'll talk about what role volunteers can play, and then any questions you have, and that's it. Okay, so Fad has done the introduction, head of partnerships and communications in EduSport. And then I started a literacy company in Nigeria. It's called the Bookworm Cafe. And what we do in the Bookworm Cafe is, it's a children's, we have 3 arms. There's a children's book club where we work with children from age 0, so newborns, encouraging parents to read to their children from when they are born and up until they are 16 years old. We also run a children's bookstore. So for people who don't want to come to the book club or to the library, they can buy books, take them home and read them. And our mission is basically to advocate for children's right to read, because I strongly believe, and that's what I push in the organization, that every child has a right to read. I'm passionate about children's literature, literacy, STEM, inclusive education, everything around children, basically. And I've had the opportunity to work with several volunteers while in Bookworm Cafe, because for each of our book club centers, we work with volunteers who we call literacy coaches. And they are the ones who work with the children and help them with any literacy needs that they might have, any gaps that we notice. They help them to bridge those gaps. So I'll be sharing my experience from mainly the Bookworm Cafe. So that's what I'll be talking about. So what is literacy? So for the basic understanding for literacy. So if you have any questions, please put it in the chat. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Right,
So please, if you have any
Yes, we
questions, you
can.
can put it in the chat. I can't see the chat yet because I'm presenting, but I'll definitely look through. So the basic definition of literacy for lots of people is ability to read and write, but there's more. There's also the ability to speak and also the ability to listen. So one of the things we'll be talking about is not just being able to read and to write, but also to get children to communicate effectively what they're reading, and also to listen attentively, so that if you're reading a story to them, they understand the story very well. But beyond that, it's also literacy is about being able to communicate effectively, because it's one thing to read and write, but if you're not communicating to the next person effectively, the person doesn't understand you and it doesn't feel like you're literate because you haven't connected to the next person. So literacy is the ability to read, write, speak, and listen in a way that lets us communicate effectively and make sense of the world. That's the definition from National Literacy Trust about what is literacy. So literacy covers more than reading and writing. There's speaking, there's listening. So all of these things are the things that we need to look out for when we are working with children to advocate for literacy. So why do we need to advocate for literacy? I think some of us will have a fair idea, or even a very good idea why we need to, why we even volunteering in the sports at Edu Sports. What can I need to see the chat. So far, please you help me, because I can't see the chat because I'm presenting. But
no problem.
If you can read out, yes. Okay. So can some of us here share why are we volunteering in the sports to help children with literacy and basically the needs that they have?
I think they are busily typing.
Okay.
Great. All right.
Can you repeat the question again?
We have a submission.
Okay, so I said, so as volunteers, why is it important to us to volunteer in the sports to help children with their literacy needs, help them to read and to write, and to bridge any gaps that they have from school? Why are we even volunteering to help children? What's all the fuss about getting children to read and to write?
Farida, we have a submission. So Kat says, because every young person has a potential to do incredible things, and something like literacy skills should not hold them back, right? So people have the potential to do incredible things, but due to lack of the ability to read and write, probably they might be held back due to such gap, or because of such a gap. So it's necessary we take them through the sessions of that sort.
Yeah, so imagine how much of a limitation it will be placed on you if you don't know how to read or to write or to speak. I mean, you basically can't connect with the rest of the world. And that's really why literacy is important for everybody. Everybody has a right to literacy. So why we're advocating for literacy is that if you look at the statistics, an organization called World Vision, the statistics are really, if you think about the numbers, it's a whole lot. That 750 million adults, 2/3 of whom are women, still lack basic reading and writing skills. So how are they communicating with people in the market? How are they communicating with their children's teachers? How are they? I mean, it feels like you're cut off from the world if you can't read, if you don't have basic reading and writing skills. And if we don't start early with young children, this stats will continue to grow, and it will become even more than what we are seeing now. And about 258 million children and youth are out of school. Basically, being out of school reduce chances of being literate, because you're not learning how to read and to write in a structured way, which will pose a problem in the future. And then 6 out of 10 children and adolescents are not learning the minimum in reading and writing and math. 6 out of 10 is a whole loss. That's more than half are not learning the minimum. So you find children who will finish elementary school, primary school, and cannot read effectively. They can't read a passage. They can't, they they struggle to read a simple passage. How does that child cope with the rest of their education? So these are things that we need to think about when we think about literacy for children. It's a serious situation that we need to take very seriously. And literacy has so many impacts. So not being able to read and write has economic impacts. People with poor literacy skills are more than 2 times as likely to be unemployed. So your chances are already so much slimmer of getting a job if you cannot read and write and communicate effectively. Like you're basically out of the pool, and then the pool gets smaller because a lot of people cannot read and write. And what that means is that people not having essential literacy skills is losing productivity, because imagine all of these people that would have been in the workforce not being able to contribute to the workforce. So productivity is lost, and it affects economic growth on a wider level. And then also it has social impacts. So people who are completely or functionally illiterate, they face prospects of poor health outcomes. First of all, they are easily, I don't know how, if you get all these broadcast messages that they send, especially during COVID, we used to get a lot of those messages that they used to send, and most of it were just not based on facts. And people who are not literate will see those kind of things and panic and take action based on those false information, because they are not able to communicate with the world effectively. So whatever you give to them, they take it, and that affects their health as well. And also, it also causes inequality, gender gap. So for this stat I'm giving you, more girls are out of school than boys. And so that means already we have more boys who have an advantage when it comes to literacy, and girls are lagging behind. And that also creates a gender gap, which is something that we are supposed to constantly be trying to bridge. But if more girls can read than boys, then that's already a problem that we need to tackle from the beginning. And then also health impacts. Studies have shown that a mother's literacy level is closely related to the child's health and survival. A mother who is literate, who can read labels on a bottle, those kinds of things will help survival rates for children, because a mother can understand all of those things, health information that you communicate to parents. So if you think about the economics of it, it's important that everybody, it's best that everybody knows how to read and write at a functional level. It's best that we also understand read and write to communicate with our peers, communicate with people in our neighborhood. So it's very important, and that's why we're advocating for literacy. Okay, so the next slide. Okay, so I mentioned that one of the things I'm going to talk about is early literacy. So because sometimes when we think about literacy, and when you're talking to parents about literacy, they say, oh, my child is too young to read, or when my child is old enough, then I will start thinking about literacy, I'll start thinking about books and all of that. But early literacy is very important. And what I mean by early literacy is what children know about reading and writing, even before they can actually learn to read. So this is from when they're really young as toddlers, even when they're newborns. What do they know about reading and writing? Are they introduced to books? Do they even know what a book is, what words are, what letters are? Those are the things that we consider when we talk about early literacy. So even in our libraries where we volunteer, we need to make room for really young children and think about programs that would directly affect the lives of children within that age range. So I'm talking as young as age 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, before they learn how to read. So and it helps us, if we think about early literacy in our sports, where I think we're laying a good foundation that would, imagine introducing children to literacy from very early. When they're a lot older, they are able to, it's easier for them to pick up literacy skills. It's easier for them to learn to read. It's easier for them to communicate with the world when you started from when they're really young. And research says that if a child's, research confirms that a child's early years brain development shapes the adults they become. So if you start really early, I call it catch them young. When you start really early, it shapes their brains, and how it makes it a whole lot easier, because you're paving the foundation, you're paving the way for literacy skills that they will need to be able to read and write properly as they grow. So the success they achieve and the contributions they make to the economy, so it contributes a whole lot to the economy, because we have started building all of these skills from when they were really young. So how do you advocate for literacy for early literacy for really young ones. Now, I don't know, are there any sports where we volunteer that we have really young children? I'm talking about toddlers, children who are really young, that we have programs for that age range?
Yes, we have. Okay, if you say toddlers, do you mean from age 0 to say 1 year?
Well, let's keep it at 2, because early literacy for 0 to 1 usually starts from home, but parents can start dropping, like in our own. So in our book club, we have parents who start dropping children from age 2, when children are a bit more independent and are not really attached to parents as much. So let's keep it at age 2. Are there any programs for children that young?
Wow, so
like toddler story time, those kind of things?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
But usually the age starts from say 3 to 3 upwards.
Okay, 3 upwards. Okay. So how to advocate for literacy for early literacy? Now, first of all, it starts with the parents. So even before parents first bring the children to the sports, what are they doing with the children at home? What do they know about literacy? Are they of the opinion that they should keep children at home till they are in primary level, when they are able to read and write? Do they think, because I've heard comments from parents that will say, no, it's too early, don't worry, when it's time, we'll bring the child. Is it not too early? Why am I reading to my child so early? Why am I buying books so early? Why am I introducing my child to books so early? But if you start setting the foundation from very early, it makes it a whole lot easier for the parents. And so that's what we need to get parents to understand. So even before they bring them to the sports, how are we engaging with parents for them to, what are you doing at home with your child? At home before the child is old enough to start coming to sports. And then do we have books for early learners? So books that are with really good pictures that they can touch, that they can point at things. Do we have that section of the library where books that will appeal to that age are placed so that they can see them? Can parents come in and say, okay, I want to sit with my child in the sports and work with my child, or hold my child so that my child can touch a book, those kinds of things. So those are the kind of things that I'm talking about when I mean early literacy. So taking advantage of the really early years. So studies have shown that the impact of reading 20 minutes a day, and 20 minutes is actually really small, but even just reading 20 minutes a day or exposing children to books for 20 minutes a day it makes a whole lot of difference in their lives. So a child who is exposed to reading for 20 minutes a day is exposed to as high as 1.8 million words per year. That's a whole lot. Like, you can't even start to think about the quantity of it, but it just shows that it's a whole lot. And the more children read, the more words that they have in their vocabulary bank, and the more words that they can use when they're writing, when they're speaking, or when they're reading, and when they're trying to do comprehension activities. And as the time reduces, so this yellow spot shows the time, as the time reduces, it shows that the number of words also reduce. So it's important that we try and expose children to books very early. So let's get into the meat of it and talk about how we as volunteers can advocate for literacy, bearing in mind that literacy starts from the very, very early years. So what role can volunteers play in advocating for literacy? The first one is basic. What are we doing to get children to enjoy reading in our sports? Do we have strictly reading time? Like when the children come to the sports, we set a particular time block for them to, all you do during that time is reading. So I don't know if someone here can share a typical Saturday, for instance, in a sport, where when the children come, what do they do? Like, are there any structured activities that the children get to do when they come to the sports?
Right, so this is sport specific, and then we have different sports. So probably some sports might love or like to use Mondays for readings. So when you come to Saka, we usually use Wednesdays for reading. So whoever
Okay.
comes into the spot, we're doing a reading session. Yes. So and then.
So how does that go?
It really goes well, though the time stipulated for reading isn't that much, but then I think it's good. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let me use an example of our book club. So when the children come, we meet every Saturday, our book club in Nigeria now, we meet every Saturday for 3 hours from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And the first thing they do is when they come is so there's a playground, so they come and they play. And then for like 15 minutes, and then everybody goes to their different groups. So we split them into different groups depending on their readings. When they first come in, we do an assessment for them to see what reading level they will fall into. So, and that's how we know the groups to place them in. So they all go to their different groups. Now, each of these groups have a book that they have to read for that, for the day. So they start with the book, the really young children, so the early literacy level, they have a literacy coach who will read to them. And then after that, do additional enrichment activities with them. It can be craft, it can be painting, different things, just to get them to also enjoy reading and start exposing them to books. Now for the older ones, they take turns to read amongst themselves, taking note of new words, doing things like comprehension activities. Reading, so that time, every child must read. So with a literacy coach supervising all of these groups, they have, they take turns to read the book that they are assigned. And then after that, they come together and do a collective activity as a group. Then they take a break. And then after that, we give them what we call independent reading time. So every child picks it. So we go with a lot of books, and every child picks a book and then sits down to practice. So the ones that are working on fluency practice reading aloud, and the ones who are already experienced readers read to themselves. They can share the books with their friends and say, did you see this? Did you see that? Have you read this book? But basically, what they know that within that time frame, all they do is reading. And then 30 minutes to close of time, they all go outside again for another outdoor time. But strictly, they know that this time, all they have to do is reading. And they are supervised by literacy coaches, who are the volunteers that we work with. So the volunteers also are also helping the children. So where children are struggling to read words, or where children are struggling to comprehend parts of a book, they also help the children break it down, explain it to them, and just get them to ensure that the reading was effective. So we prioritize. As volunteers, we need to prioritize, because that's why the children are there anyway. And that's why we're advocating for literacy. We need to prioritize reading for pleasure, that children not just read, but also enjoy the reading experience. So we need to strictly schedule time for reading, and then create book club type activities. Create a book club where we can talk to the children about anything, really. So discussing literature can take all kinds of forms depending on books that we're reading. So we talk about all kinds of books, depending on, there's no limits, non-fiction, fiction. Well, we don't do so much of audiobooks, but we talk about all kinds of books. Just get the children to think outside of the box. Sometimes they do things like role plays. We'll talk about enrichment activities, but this I'm starting with reading, the very basic reading, like every child gets to spend time with the book and read. And then also designing simple posters and hanging it in the library. So the posters, like this is a picture of this child reading. A poster that has, when the children are reading in the sports, taking a picture of children reading in and really concentrating, or in really nice positions that will make people look at it and be really interested, like, oh, this seemed like the child was enjoying the book. So we put all those kind of pictures on posters. So when children come into the library or the sports, they see those kinds of images and they see that, oh, reading looks like fun. It looks like this is something that is exciting. Just things that will make them excited about reading. We also do things like reading quotes, like reading will take you places, just designed with colors and markers and all of those kind of things. So it just gets them, when they are in the library, it feels like a reading environment. And what happens here is reading. So it's not that we need to now force them to read during that time. They know that, oh, they're in the book club, they're in the library, and this is what happens during that time. So we need to prioritize reading and make it really, like, be committed to the fact that children just need to read. Every child has a right to read, and you need to practice reading to be a better reader. So the first thing is to prioritize reading first and foremost.
Farida, not to cut you short, I don't know, okay. Did you practice a parliamentary session at Bookworm Cafe? Because recently
what's that?
I don't know, a session where children sort of sit and then agree, argue on issues. So probably rising issues and stuff like that. I think I saw it online and I was like, okay, this is really nice.
Yes, so children always have different opinions when they read a book. Sometimes some of them are just trying to be silly and have fun with the book, but they always have different opinions, and there's always arguments. Everybody's trying to prove their points. It gets them to speak, which is what I said that about reading is not just literacy is not just about reading and writing. They need to speak. You need to ask them questions, and they listen to you and interpret it and respond to the questions that you're asking them. So all those interactions need to happen while they're reading. And that's why volunteers serve as literacy coaches, because you are engaging them as they're reading. You don't just leave them to, oh, the child is reading. Engage them, like, oh, tell me about what you're reading. We also do role plays as well, but I'll talk about that in the next slide. So role plays put themselves in the shoes of the characters. What would you have done differently? Those kinds of activities will get children reading, speaking, listening, and also even trying to write their own stories as well. All right, so after reading, what do you do after reading? What are just then you don't need to force them to read. They pick up books on their own independently, and they're doing a lot more reading. So read aloud. So apart from the regular, every child sits down to read. In my book club, I work with children from age 8 to 10. They can all read fluently. But one thing I do that is very important is read aloud, because when you're reading aloud books to children, and reading aloud is basically picking up a book like this and then reading the text. You can also do read to me, I read to you. So you pass the text around and everybody takes their turns to read. But the important thing about reading aloud is I, as the experienced teacher, I'm modeling reading for the children to see. So they're seeing how I'm pausing, they're seeing how I'm taking notes of punctuation, and I'm demonstrating it for them to see, so that when it's their turn to read aloud, or when they're reading aloud to their younger ones, they are trying to imitate the kinds of things I did when I was reading. My expressions, what am I doing? How am I acting when I'm reading? And also when I'm reading aloud, when we read aloud to children, we can also read books that are books that they would never even pick on, they would ordinarily not pick on their own. But because we've chosen it as a book that we're going to read aloud, everybody gets to experience that book. And the discussions keep going as we're reading aloud. So students can comprehend texts that are 2 reading levels above their independent reading level. So books that they would think typically are too difficult for them, when we're reading aloud, it becomes easier, because we're reading and we're talking and we're demonstrating and we're just enjoying ourselves reading. So we invite, and then also in your sports, another thing you can do is invite random people to come and read. Let's say you have a friend who is around in town, someone you respect a lot, just someone that the children will be interested in seeing, or somebody different from who they are used to. Invite adults, let everybody be involved. When you have guests, children are always excited when it comes to reading, because they're thinking, oh, the guest, who is this? And what does this person sessions, just informal discussions. You can think about any kinds of things for depending on the books that they are reading, for them to have informal, nothing too structured. Just I'll give you an example. Yesterday I was reading to some children. The book I was reading is called Malik's Bridge. It's a book about 4 African children who, because they were going on holiday and couldn't reach each other, they decided to build a bridge that will connect all the countries in Africa. So the teacher made them understand that this project that you want to do, building a bridge, is actually going to be a big project. But why don't you submit your idea to a science? Decided to submit their idea and all of that. But then after reading, what I did with the children was I asked them to pretend like we were in their own school science fair. and give me ideas that they would submit if they were in a science fair. And I got lots of really interesting ideas. So it felt really exciting, and children were really coming up with all kinds of ideas. They were talking. So these are ways that they practice speaking. So not just beyond reading and writing, they were talking, having interactions with themselves, thinking out of the box, trying to solve problems. Those are the kind of enriching activities that as volunteers we can do with the children in the sports. Also, what do we do with writing? Some children write unprovoked, like they just sit down, because they've read lots of stories, they want to construct their own stories. But we need to celebrate the stories that they are writing, because literacy is reading, is writing, is speaking. So we need to celebrate the stories of the children. We publish the stories on notice boards, and children are always happy to share their stories with you. Like, will you read my story? And they are always happy. Like, they don't write their stories and hide it in their bag. They want to share it. They want you to see it. So do we put it on the notice board? Like, look at what this person has written. You know, those kinds of activities will make it really exciting for children. So those are the kind of enriching activities that I'm talking about. And then also encourage role plays. So let the children step into the characters that they are reading about, into the fictional world. So if it's a world that doesn't exist, it's even more exciting for the children. Let them step into it and, try to act like the characters, change something about the characters in the book, change something that the characters did. It helps them with their own imagination, so that when they're writing their own stories, they also can think out of the box and construct stories that's, beyond what they've ever read. Can you hear me?
You're loud and clear. Great. Such an amazing session ongoing.
Okay, then, but for us to promote literacy, we need books. And this books, for books, it's quite a different subject, because books, you need money to purchase books. But I understand that at least to a decent level, our sports have books in the libraries. So we need to now make the most of the books that we have in the libraries, because it's one thing to have books on the shelf, but do the children walk up to the shelves to pick up the books without being asked to? So how do we arrange the books? Sometimes when children look at a shelf and they're completely confused because they don't understand how the shelf is arranged, it's a drawback, because it's not, you need to think about how you arrange the books on the shelves so that the children look at it and they're inquisitive. So do you arrange the books by genre? For instance, you have African titles in one corner, adventure in one corner. So children who really like adventure will know, oh, this is my corner and this is where I'm going to stay every time I come here. Also, how do we place the books, especially for early literacy now, the really young children, when books are facing outwards on the shelf like this? When they see the picture, they're curious and they want to pick up the book. But if you put it like this, with the spine on the shelf, sometimes it takes a lot to get children to go and pick it up. So for really young children that do lots of picture books, how do we place it? Do we place the book so that the children can really see what's happening on the cover and are curious about, even if they're not reading yet, they are curious and want to pick up the book and see what the pictures say and all of that. Also, even at the sport level, we can organize book drives. We have friends in the communities. We have influential people in the communities, people that we know in the communities who, when they see what we are doing in the sports, they are really inspired. Okay, so looking out for those kind of opportunities, there's also another organization called Books to Africa. When you go on their website and you request for a book for there's a waiting list, yes, but they usually pick up those kinds of requests for countries in Africa. And since EduSport has several libraries, these are kind of opportunities. So that's why I said this really concerns EduSport on a wider level, not the sport itself. So prioritize making sure that your library is good enough for the children. And I don't mean in terms of quantity of books, I mean in terms of what you currently have. How are you making the most of it? How are you arranging the books for the children to see? How are you displaying it on the table? How are you categorizing the books in different themes or genres so that it will attract the children? Okay. And next, for volunteers, also, we need to engage family members. Are there any sports that run like family events where parents are encouraged to come to the sports? Because these are the kind of engagements I'm talking about.
In fact, all sports do. So when it comes to
Yeah.
community engagement, principally, all
Yes,
sports.
very important, very important. So engaging family members, because sometimes when it comes to children not reading at home, sometimes it's just that parents don't know what they don't know any difference. Like they just think children will go to school and read and that's it. That's where it ends. But we need to keep on educating family members and caregivers and talk about the importance of literacy to them, organizing family events where parents can come, maybe family nights where parents can come, we play games, do a couple of literacy activities, and children can demonstrate what they're learning in the sports. But then at the end of the day, the message for parents is that please prioritize reading. Let the children come to the sports regularly. If they're taking, if there are any sports that they take books home from, let them ensure that the children read the books so that everybody is involved, because literacy is a partnership. You can't say that the teacher in school is going to ensure that the child reads. What happens to how much time the child spends at home? So research demonstrates that family support for language and literacy activities at school and at home is positively related to children's outcome, including reading acquisition, language development, language vocabulary, conceptual development, and literacy activities, achievements. So family members must be involved when it comes to literacy. So as much as we're trying to organize reading events for the children, we also need to think about events where we can invite parents and they will be part of the discussions going on, part of the activities, events where they need to also prepare the children, maybe spelling bees where they are involved in the preparation and ensure that their children are practicing at home. Those kind of events make them see that, oh, this is what literacy is all about. This is how it works. And you're demonstrating it to them for them to see. Okay, and then as volunteers, how are we also developing ourselves? So it's one thing to say you're working with children and you're helping them with literacy, but you also need to learn even if you didn't go to school to study English or reading or anything literacy related, there's lots of opportunities like this one where we are in that talk about literacy, that even talk about the science of reading and how children learn to read. Those kinds of opportunities always come up every now and then, but do we pass up these opportunities and not take them seriously? Because even as I am, and I'm running a literacy organization, every week I attend at least 3 different, these are free events, I don't pay for them. There are webinars all over the place where I can join and then learn from other people's experiences. Because at the end of the day, the interaction with the children in one sport is likely not going to be the same thing as the interaction with children in another sports. But we can learn the best practices. What are you doing that is working? I pick it up. What is the other volunteer in another sport doing that is working? Okay, I'm going to adopt it. I'm going to adopt it. So we learn from each other and also take our own learning and development seriously. You can't say that because I can read and I can write, I'm good. I don't need to learn more about literacy. You need to recognize the importance of continued learning to be intentional, because every day there's new research about reading, there's new research about literacy, but if we don't keep ourselves exposed to all of these learning opportunities, we just sit down and, and not move with the time. We need to collaborate with other volunteers, like in the feed. What are we sharing about literacy? Are you reading what the literacy coordinator is sharing, all the tips that the literacy coordinator shares in the feed? Are you reading them, and not just reading them, but planning to apply them in your sports to make a difference for the children in the sports? So we need to be very intentional about our own learning and development. So collaborate with other volunteers and listen to ways that they provide literacy experiences in their own sports, and take advantage of free learning opportunities. So all these empowerment sessions, I attended the last one that Gloria did, and it was really good. So all of these empowerment sessions are really good for helping us to develop, not just in terms of the skill, but also the other soft skills that we need to be able to work with children. And also as volunteers, seek opportunities to teach others, because when you have a responsibility to share with others what you know, you go and do your homework and you learn, and you make sure that you know what you're doing. So all of these things feed into learning and development. How serious are we taking our learning and development, even if we feel like we're not going to continue working in the sports for long term, but as long as you're working with children, you all need to be constantly developing yourself. So taking advantage of these kinds of opportunities. And I think that's okay. And then lastly, being a reader yourself. I mean, this is like very fundamental, because when you are interested in how literate you are, when you are interested in developing yourself, you take advantage of opportunities to learn, and you are a better you're a better reader, and you're able to talk to children about the importance of reading. You're able to model reading for children, because I see that one of the things that is lacking is us adults not modeling reading for children to see. So it's not they don't see it as often amongst adults. So why would they even be curious and want to pick up books? So also being readers ourselves, we can also establish book clubs amongst ourselves as volunteers and talk about the book, talk about books, talk about just basically ensuring that you're reading and you're developing your mind and your brain, even as volunteers. So it's not just about the children. We also, as volunteers and as leaders, need to be literate so that we can influence the children that we're working with positively. So establish a book club with other volunteers to allow for reflective time with colleagues and opportunities for critical thinking and discussion. So I think that's the last point. Yes, that's it. So any questions, clarifications, or anything like that? Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Oh, okay. So do we have any clarifications, any experiences from our sports, unique experiences from our sports that we want to share based on all of these things I've mentioned?
Can I just come in, Farida? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I just want to say, I think, I'm sorry, I'm in the dark here. I want to say that was the most incredible presentation. I feel really inspired, and I think you just covered so much there, ranging right across, advocacy and in your own family, going to the wider community. I think I'm still just digesting everything you've said, and I think you clearly speak so passionately about literacy yourself. So my question is, what led to you developing this interest in literacy in particular? And what was it that sparked this particular love? And then I can see Etienne has also got her hand up afterwards. I'll jump in as host as Fad has gone. I think his internet's dodgy.
Okay, so what led to, so I'm right from when I was really young, I loved reading books. And then when I was gonna have my own children, I thought to myself, I can't have children that will not enjoy the same passion as I have. So I started really young with my children. So I was one of those parents that used to read to their children before they were born, like in pregnancy. And then, so I started gathering books for them. And then at some point I had so many books, I didn't know what to do with them. And I thought, okay, let me work with my friends' children. And that's how I started lending books to my neighbors. And then what I noticed was it wasn't just about having the books. I also needed to step in to encourage the children to read. So I decided to start a book club in my estate where I live with the children, and then they will come, we'll read together. So starting from that small unit, we started, not everybody could come to that small unit because Lagos is a really big place where everybody can reach a really small community. So we started, when we getting, my friends that live far away from me will say, oh, I want to join this, but I can't come. So that's how I got the idea for setting up small book clubs in communities to work with children on, it's a Saturday book club, so to work with children on Saturdays.
And how many book clubs do you have across Lagos?
So at some points, just before COVID, we had 17, but now we've narrowed it down to just 2 book clubs.
And just a final,
it's intensive to run.
Yeah, just a final quick question. I'm just learning so much myself. What problems have you found in terms of rolling out a model? Like, do you allow those book clubs to have their own their own structure? I know you spoke about this a bit, but we often struggle in EduSpots with that balance between community drive and ownership, and also having some kind of more standardized model, and just wondered your thoughts on that. And then I'll pass over to Etienne for her question.
Okay, so for each of the clubs, we pick out the books that they read and do plans for them. So the flavor is now in the person who is using the plan. So they bring in their own style, but they already have like a set, we call them reading plans that they follow. So after reading, this is what you do, this is what you look out for. These are the additional enrichment activities you do after reading. But because they're different people working with the children, they also bring in their own flavor, their own experiences. So there's a little bit of difference because they're different people, but at the end of the day, it's kind of similar in the different centers.
Mm-hmm. Fad, I'm handing back over to you as chair, but Etienne has a question.
All right, so I'm really sorry. My network isn't so good at this point. So Etienne, give it a go.
Okay, hi everyone. So
Hi.
my question to Farida is, have you ever had experiences with parents who don't actually see the need for literacy, especially early literacy, and how did you handle it? And then for community engagement, how do you get parents on board? Especially with my experience in the community was that parents didn't see the importance of like giving their children time to do after school reading activities. Even though we visited the parents, we spoke to them, we showed them the statistics, we discussed the possibilities that their children opportunities that children would have if they were better read. But it's somehow not a lot of parents bought into the idea. So for something like that, do you have any advice on how to handle a situation of that sort?
Yeah, so especially for early literacy, we get that all the time where parents will say, oh, don't worry, when she starts reading, I'll start introducing her to books. But one thing that I know that works really well, and that's one thing I'm very big on, is how we do advocacy. So is it, when I started, it was just me and my small community in my estate. But so I'm very big on, I don't know if you follow me on social media, I'm very big on putting the work out there because I feel like literacy is something that when people start to see the evidence, they are the ones that come to meet you and they have questions and they want to be involved. So every little thing that we're doing. So when my children were really young, when I used to read aloud to them, I would do videos and share it on social media, and people will ask me lots of questions like, what kind of books can I get? Is it not too early? And then those kinds of engagements will get me to start talking about reading. In fact, just today, a parent sent me a message about asking whether is it too early for her to start reading to introducing her 6-month-old baby to books. And I shared from my experience that I started really early and I noticed the difference in my children. So my first child started reading when he was 3 because we had started really early. So when you use your own experiences or experiences from children that you have seen, success stories in the community that you have seen, parents are usually, they like models, they like examples, they like to see things that have worked. And it's easier to convince them when they see something that has worked in real life. It's easier for them to get them to adopt it. We have a lot of parents who initially, when they first find out about the book club, they're not really convinced, and they're thinking. Some of them even start to think about it like a daycare. That's just a place they come and drop their children and go out, And then, so it's also there's a lot. That's why I mentioned community involvement, involving parents. I do a lot of sessions with parents where just basically talking about literacy. Why is it important? I'll use my children as examples. I'll use children that I know that have been very successful with being exposed to literacy from very early. I use those as examples. It's easier to convince them when they see models, when they see something that has worked. When you mention a child that they know and they're thinking, oh, I've actually seen this thing you're mentioning in that child, so this is probably something. But then we're not there yet. I mean, it's not perfect. We still get people who are adamant and insist that literacy is not as you make it seem. But over time, looking at the influence that we've had, I think that it's getting better. We get a lot of, we are able to engage parents better now because we've had this track record over the years where they've seen the kind of work that we've done and the influence we've had on children in the different communities. So track record, engaging parents constantly. Sometimes it's difficult because some parents, it's difficult to convince parents sometimes. But consistency, sharing your work so that people can see, sharing on your status, sharing children social pictures or videos of children reading, really young children reading, and they enjoying it. They're usually curious and want to engage and ask questions and ask what is happening here and how it works.
Amazing. So Farida,
Okay, thank you, Farida.
You're welcome.
I missed the session. So I would want to ask, what are the type of books you use at your reading clubs? So if I say types of books, are they mostly Western books? Are they African books, or do you sort of blend the both?
Okay, very good question, Fad. So when we first started in 2016, it was a lot of Western books. We didn't have so many books written by Nigerians or Africans. And then over time, and that's because also in the markets, the publishers were not really paying attention to those kind of books in Nigeria. And then gradually we started to see new books written by Nigerians or Africans, and these books were winning local literature prizes. And these books started to get attention. So we started, initially when we started, we probably had like 4 of those kind of books in our collection. But I will never forget one day, one very particular day when I read a picture book written by a Nigerian to a child. And she said, I want to read more books like this. And that was when I saw, that was the first time I had an encounter with how much reading books that reflects children surrounding, books that tell their stories. That was the first time I saw the kind of influence it had on children. So gradually we now started sourcing. So like I've gone to the ends of Africa to look for books. So we've collected books. We even have Edusport's Kwame book. So we started collecting books from, as long as it was books telling stories about African children, we started collecting all these kind of books. And right now, 80 to 90% of the books we read are books published by local publishers or books published by publishers around Africa. And they are really, really enjoying the books. We get such great feedback that I don't think I will go back to Western books.
Wow. So I think I saw online recently about one of my favorites, Mamle Wulu, the Kaya girl.
Yeah.
Yes, it was nice to see one of my favorite books in your catalog.
Yes.
Great. So Ima, I think you can go now. Ima, over to you.
All right. My question has to do with where parents think that their school is enough. I mean, will do enough for them. And then the other side of the question also has to do with where the sports is kind of located in a school. And how do you convince parents that you are not overburdening them? And then what kind of programs can the school initiate outside the classroom? You know, the sport is already in the school. And parents think that inside the classroom activities should be enough. So what should be some of the programs outside the classroom, the sports in a school should do? And then how do you communicate this importance? I mean, how important it is to the parents as well? Okay,
so let's take them one at a time. The first one is when parents think that the classroom is enough, right? The books that they read in the classroom is enough. So that's for parents who are not very aware, that's usually the first hurdle you have to cross for them to be able to convince them to see that there's more that needs to be done. There needs to be extra. So when we first started, a lot of these kinds of comments that you're mentioning. So parents will say, but they read in school, they have a good library, they have books in school. They even give them the books from school to take home. So why are they doing extra? So one of the things that, like I said, I'm very big on advocacy. And one of the things I started doing was, we started keeping track of our learners, the people who used to come to the book club. And every time at the end of a school year, we'll get parents contact us and say, my child was best in literacy. It happened so much that that now became what we would tell parents, that, so it's beyond that. We started using those kinds of stories to tell parents that children who is not enough for them to learn how to read in their classroom, they need to be excited about words. They need to be excited about the ideas that they see in books. They need to be able to pick up books on their own. And when they develop that habit, you see them engaging their literacy in school like it's a piece of cake. So at the end of the day, they're getting awards for literacy. It's showing in their work that they're doing in school that these children are doing much more than what we do in school. There's something extra that they get, and it's reflecting in the results of the children, is reflecting in how they speak, it's reflecting in how they write, it's reflecting. So those kinds of evidences are what you can use to convince parents. Examples, models usually make it easier to convince parents. When you use models and you show parents things that have worked, you show them examples with children that have gone through these experiences, that come to the spot regularly. There's always a difference between them and the children who don't engage with literacy as much. That's the first question. What was the second one again, please?
The second one was on the various activities sports within the school can do outside the classroom too. Yeah.
Okay, so the second one is you said when a sport is within the school. Even so, our Saturday book clubs are actually run in schools. So when the schools are not there on Saturday, and I'm very keen on making them very independent of schools. I don't want it to be an extension of what is done in schools, because that way we are not restricted when it comes to what we are reading. We're not restricted when it comes to the kind of activities we're doing. We are doing activities that we know, evidence-based activities, what we see, what are the needs of the children, what we notice are the needs of the children, are the things that we work with, are the things that we put in the reading plan, so that we are tackling those issues head on with the children. So from the beginning, when parents are registering for the book club, they usually ask or usually want to ask the school questions when they have further questions, but we tell them the school has nothing to do with the book clubs. If you want to find out about the book clubs, you're speaking to Bookcom Cafe, because we are very independent. We run our own programs. We run we don't run the school curriculum, because parents tend to think that it's part of the school curriculum when they think you are part of the school. We have nothing to do with the school curriculum. So in terms of enriching activities, I always like activities like challenges, and think children to participate in all of these challenges. Here we call it competitions. So get the children to participate in challenges that would encourage them to compete against children in other areas. So I always encourage schools to sign up for things like inter-school debates, inter-school spelling competitions, inter-school spelling bees, just something to take the children out of their natural environment and get them to see how other children are engaging with literacy, and also expand their worldview of words and all of those kinds of things. Also, for literacy organizations, the amount of the attention you pay to literacy details is much more than what they would do in a normal classroom, because a normal classroom has numeracy, they have literacy. So going the full length of what you need to do for literacy, making sure that you do read aloud for the children, that you do proper enrichment activities that make the children engage with the books, doing role plays, Fad gave a good example of the parliamentary session, those kinds of activities. They can't really do that in school because there's not enough time. There's so much to cover in school that all of these extra things can be done in a literacy setting, where all you have to do is literacy, and then maybe a bit of additional STEM as well.
Great, Ima, I'm sure your question has been duly answered.
Yes.
So, amazing. Etiam had her hands up. Etiam, give it a go.
Okay, all right, thank you. So my question is in two folds. One, what is do you have a diversity or inclusivity plan for your book clubs. So what do I mean by that? I mean books on topics that are normally not really discussed in African settings, especially when it comes to gender parity and issues like that. And then also, do you have limitations? Maybe you don't read certain books because some parents don't like certain ideas to be taught to their children. And things. So how do you handle issues like that?
Okay, so I'm very big on inclusivity when it comes to books. So because that's really children, learn a lot from stories. So we read books about, just like you said, gender inequality, and oh my God, the questions you get when you read those kind of books with children, you just know that they're learning and you're opening their minds to it. We've not really had any issues with parents saying, well, generally, I know the kind of books that parents usually frown at, these books with magic and all of that, but they don't influence our collection. I'm very big on diversity when it comes to books. So we read books about children with sickle cell disease because I want the children to understand these things through stories, not necessarily because they know people who are affected by a particular disease, but when they see it in books, they ask questions. And also another thing we do is when we have authors who write this really diverse books and books that encourage inclusivity, we invite them to do book readings. And one thing that really changes the game is when the children engage the authors and ask them, why did you write this book? Is it that you have maybe sickle cell, for instance? Those are kind of questions they ask the author who wrote a book about sickle cell. Did you have sickle cell? Did your brother have, so they ask the direct questions because they're always thinking about why when they're reading books that encourage inclusivity. They're always thinking about what led you to, what kind of experiences have you had that led you to write these kinds of books. Parents will always have their own preferences when it comes to books. But over time, because they've sort of seen us as an authority and like we know what we're doing, and you demonstrate it because they see the results. They know that, okay, this is book club and book club is separate from my own activities. So we don't really get those kinds of parents bugging us in terms of, I don't want my children to read these kinds of books, because they think they are thinking, oh, if Bookworm Cafe is reading this book, then it must be a good book. So yeah.
Right, amazing. So beautiful. All right. I think if there aren't any more questions, we are approaching the end of the session. And then I've really enjoyed this session. I should be very honest. Farida, we are highly appreciative of you taking time off your busy schedule to share with us your rich insights and experience. We thank you very much, and then we hope to have you here again some other time. So as a last word, what do you have for the entire team? In fact, everybody over here, what do you have for us?
What do I have?
Yes, as a last word.
Okay, as a last word, my last word.
It could be a sentence. It could be a sentence.
Yes, it's usually, yeah, I understand what you mean by last word. It's usually always my last word. And I always like to say, don't force children to read books that they don't enjoy. You're doing more harm than good.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Farida. We are highly honored to have you here to digest this topic for us. And then, ladies and gentlemen, this is where we draw the curtains to the end of our session. A very big thank you to everyone who made time to join. At this point, I'd say Itai Doshin and a very good evening to you all.